Hi, today I'm going to go through how to set up a mix in Pro Tools. In this video I'm going to go through importing audio tracks, arranging audio, routing for subgroups, reverb and effects sends, and setting up memory locations. So let's get straight into it and import our audio. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go up to File, and we're going to go to Import Audio, and then this window will open up and we can select the audio tracks we want to bring in. So let's say our floor tom from take 1 and second floor tom, our rack tom, overheads, and so on. And then we have two options here. We can add the audio or we can copy it. If we add the audio, the actual audio files will stay in their current location and the session will just link to them. If we copy, then the audio files will actually be brought into the session and saved in the audio files folder beside the Pro Tools session file. Let's go ahead and bring in some audio. And this is the next window that we see, audio import options. So we can set it at the session start or at wherever we've selected, or we can give an exact SMPTE timecode point in the session. We can also choose to bring the tracks in on new audio tracks or just bring them into the clips list. So they'll just be in the session and we can grab them and bring them into audio tracks we already have set up. Okay, I'm going to select new track. Okay, so now that I have all my audio in the session, it's important that I'm aware of what's on every single track. It can be an idea to just play through and solo the different audio tracks and just see what's on them. And of course, what instrument they are. So what I'm going to do is go through and group all of the audio according to its instrument type. So I have my drums together, and I have my bass mics, and I have my guitars. Now I'm going to color coordinate those. So I'm going to select all my drum tracks and just click on the color tab at the bottom, and we get a palette, and I can just click blue for my bass, select brown, and for my guitars, I'll select light blue. This just means we can move around the session quickly. Because of the color, we don't have to read the track name, and if we always have the same order of tracks, so kick drum and snare drum, you can really move quickly around the session. So once we've color coordinated the tracks, another thing to take note of is making sure that you can actually read each track's name. For example, this track here is extra snare ambient 01. It might be an idea to just bring that down in letter count to extra SNR for snare ambient. And now we can read it quite clearly. So the next thing to do is start subgrouping the audio. Now, in the last video, I showed you how to group tracks, and I'll show you again. We'll group the drums, so I'll select all the channels, press Command and G, and it gives us the option to create a group. I'll call it drums. When I group these together, you'll see that G, which is the letter assigned to this group, so I can turn the group on and off by pressing G on the keyboard, allows us to group the channels together. Now, this isn't the same as subgrouping the audio. When we subgroup the audio, we're essentially taking all of the outputs of these channels and routing them into one channel, and that will allow us to EQ the whole drum kit or compress the whole drum kit and basically act on all of the instruments at the same time. If you compress your drum bus, the compressor is interacting with all of the drums at the same time, and it's completely different to compressing each drum individually. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have selected all the tracks. I'm going to press Alt and Shift, and that will allow me to route all the selected tracks. And so I'll just zoom in really quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the output. I'm going to go to a bus. Let's say bus 25 and 26. All of the selected tracks will now be sent out bus 25 and 26. I'm going to add a new track, so Shift Command N. And we are going to select a stereo auxiliary input, create. And now I'm going to set this track's input to be bus 25 and 26. And I can rename that bus and call it drum bus. Now, all of these audio channels are traveling to this channel. It's also important to safety solo, so I'm going to press Command and hit the solo button. And this means that if I solo any of the drums, which are now grouped, I'll turn off the group by pressing G. This channel will route to this, and because I've safety soloed, we will hear it. If I don't, for example, let me just set the drums to play. You can see the audio is traveling through. If I don't press Command solo and safety it, it will be muted along with all the other channels. Let's see that. And you can see now the audio is traveling to the auxiliary, but it's going no further because the auxiliary is muted. So we safety solo, and let's call this auxiliary drums. And let's add in our master fader again. So Command Shift N, and we will add a master fader. So as an example, I'll just add an EQ and brighten up the whole drum kit. And you can hear that it's processing all of the drums. And we'll get rid of that. We can also subgroup our bass. Select auxiliary input, mono. And so we will select these two, send them to a mono bus, let's say 23. Have 23 come in here. You can rename it bass bus. Safety solo. And you can see that the audio is traveling through this fader. And we'll name that. And all of my guitars. So now we have all of our instruments subgrouped, and we can do as much subgrouping as we feel is necessary. So I can always subgroup the 2 kick tracks to 1. And the same with the snare. So let's move this guy. And we will take the kick outs and send them out a bus. Let's say bus 29, and have bus 29 appear here. Now where this differs is, we want to safety solo this, but we want to send it to the drums. So this will be our kick bus. And we're going to send the output of this to our drum bus. And similarly with the snare, we're going to send the 2 of these to a mono bus. And the mono bus will appear here. And then we will send the output to our drums. So the signal on the snare top is traveling to this channel, safety solo it, and then to this channel, and then to the master. And it's allowing us to subgroup the 2 of these channels into one fader, and then that fader go to the drum bus. So it's quite handy because we can treat the 2 channels as one. So for example, you might want to process the top snare and bottom snare separately, but you might want to then EQ both of them together. So you could EQ the top snare, EQ the bottom snare, and then EQ both snares at the same time. Or just use one compressor for both top and bottom. Similarly with the kick drum. Another thing we need to set up is a reverb send. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go to my sends. I'm going to just press Alt, and I'm going to click bus and bring it out a bus, let's say 33 and 34. And because I pressed Alt, it's going to send out on every single channel in the entire session. I'm going to do that again. Alt, bus, 35 and 36. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up two auxiliary inputs. So Shift Command N, stereo, auxiliary input, and we have an auxiliary. I'm going to just right click on it and press duplicate, and we get a second one. And so my top reverb is going to be just my room reverb, and then below that I'm going to have a plate. So let's name these two guys. Room and plate. And let's take these buses which are being sent on these faders and have them appear on these two channels. So 33 and 34 are going to arrive here, and 35 and 36 are going to appear here. And we can rename them. I can rename that as room verb. And you'll see that it's renamed here and here. And we can rename this plate verb and the same. Now, when we were setting up headphone sends, we pressed the pre-fader button. But when we're using them for effects, we don't want to actually change to pre-fader, because we want the actual channel faders to affect the level. So for example, if I fade out my guitar, I don't want it to continue going to the reverb. So this fader affects the volume going out to this fader, and this fader is going out room reverb, so it will appear here. Safety solo, so that we can hear reverbs, and we'll just add two reverb plugins. And Valhalla vintage verb. Now, because these are safety soloed, if I solo my snare drum, if I turn up my room, it gets sent to here. If I turn up my plate, you can hear it get sent to here. So this just allows, we can tweak our reverbs later according to the actual mix, but it's a good idea to just get something up and running so that you can start working straight away. Now, the next thing I wanted to go through is setting memory locations. So this just allows us to get around a session quickly. So we have our color coordination, which allows us to move two tracks quite quickly. We've set up subgroups, which allows us to act on multiple audio sources at the same time, as well as control the volume of them. But it's also handy to be able to move around the timeline very quickly. So with memory locations, we can choose a number of different things. If I press Command and 5 on the number pad, our memory locations will appear. And when I want to set a memory location, I just press Enter. So let's go to the start of the session. And so the guitar starts. So I'm going to press Enter and just call it Intro. And I'm going to set this as a marker. So basically this is just a point in time. We could also set it as a selection, where it would actually select a certain area, which we could then loop. Or I can just make it a marker that has no actual timeline properties. With our general properties, we can choose what zoom settings we were using, pre and post roll times, track show and hide, track heights, group enables, and Windows configuration. So we've got a lot of power with this. So first of all, I'm just going to set up my markers for the session. So intro, verse 1, chorus 1, break, verse 2, middle 8. And so on, which allows us to move around a session quickly. So in this way, we don't have to look through the session to find those locations. You just have your memory locations open and you can skip to any part of the song. Another very handy feature of memory locations is the track show and hide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set up a memory location and I'm going to call it all tracks. And I'm going to select none, but I am going to select track show and hide. And I'm going to set up a new location again. But first of all, I'm going to hide everything but auxiliary channels. Show only aux tracks. Now, this is a very simplified mix. We have our kick. This is snare. I forgot to name it. Drums, room, plate, bass, and guitar. And so it's a very pared down version of the mix. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a new memory location and I'm going to select none for the timeline and I'm going to select track show and hide and we will call it auxes only. And so now I can go from all tracks to just my auxes. And so sometimes when you're dealing with a large session, you'll have a massive track count and it can be very handy to just pare it down to its simplest form. We could also change this by removing our reverbs by just clicking hide, and I'll just make sure my master is showing. And then I could go to aux only and edit it. So now it should be this setup. Let's go all tracks, aux only. And so it's a quick way of paring down the session to its simplest form, which at the end of the day, we are balancing the audio and having as much detail as possible gives us the facilities to do as good a job as possible. But sometimes you can get bogged down in just purely the size of a session. And so being able to pare it down to its simplest format quickly so that you can just move the main components of the mix can be quite handy. Okay, so thanks very much for watching. In part 2, we're going to go through gain staging and corrective EQ and a couple of mixing tricks. Okay, thanks very much.